It's been a long time coming, but I know.
Hi, everyone. Hoping that you all are doing very well. We're going to be addressing the topic of the fallacy of democracy. Many of us have been led to believe that we live in a democracy. We live in a democratic society wherein everyone gets an equal voice. That is a fallacy. And that fallacy is pushed even more during these election seasons. And so you hear all of this rhetoric about democracy and how important it is and how we have to fight for democracy. And there is even a political party that is named after this construct. But we're going to look at what's really going on under this democracy fallacy. If you really study democracy and look at the foundation of it, what you see are elements of theocracy. A large part of the democracy deception involves individuals being engaged in self deception about what democracy is all about. And so individuals have been led to believe that democracy is this all important dynamic that we need to have in society, and that the best societies are democratic. However, very few individuals really dig into what does this mean, this democracy? What is it really all about? And for many people, there is this belief that it's about everyone, all of the people having equal power. However, that is far from what we actually have in place in terms of what we are calling a democratic society. A large part of the confusion related to what democracy is all about comes from a misunderstanding or a partial understanding of this Greek construct, this idea of demo, which some people understand to mean people in the Greek, and this other part of krasi, which people understand to be rule. Now, the rule part is consistent. However, the construct of demo relating to people is not completely consistent. And so you have a number of people that believe that this democracy is about the rule of the common people. There are also instances when individuals believe that this rule by the common people is through a representative form of governance. And so people believe that they are voting the people into power that represent the power of the people. However, what has really taken place in terms of this democracy is that you don't have a rule by the people. We now have a rule of the people, or power over the people. You have this Latin archaea, this governing of the people. And so, what many people are believing is a rule by the people is really the antithesis of that. If you think about the way that the society is structured, it's very rare for individuals, the people, to actually vote on a single law. Sometimes they come up on the ballot, but it's rare that the common people actually have a voice in the governing of themselves. And so when you look at it that way, you see that we don't really have a democracy. And in fact, we don't have a representative form of democracy either. When you think of a representative, An attorney would be a representative, representing the wishes of the client, representing the desires of the client. That's not exactly what's going on in terms of the way our society is structured. Rarely do individual members of the society get to have a voice in how one of the representatives represents them. And so these so called representatives vote based upon whatever the representative wants to vote based upon. It has little or no impact based upon the people. The impact is about the representative, it's not about the people impacting the representative. Because, quite frankly, most people don't even know when representatives are voting on particular topics. They don't have any um, previous or prior information about what's coming up for a vote. And even if they had that prior information, it doesn't mean that that representative is then going to be impacted by anything that is coming from the common people. And so there is rule, but it's rule by a select group of people over the population. It's governance over the people. It's not really that by the people, for the people, of the people. It's really about a select collective and them governing, them having a voice, and them doing what they believe is best based upon what they desire or what they believe is best. It has very little to do with what common people are attempting to assert or what common people need or what common people desire. And while we have this democracy construct that appears to be tied to the people ruling, there is another understanding of democracy, that demo part, that is more consistent with what we are actually dealing with and what has actually been structured. And so we have this demo, which is pretty ambiguous, quite frankly. It can mean multiple things. With respect to the ancient Greek, if we were specifically talking about human rule or rule by the people, there are other constructs or other words that could be used to more clearly indicate that we are talking about people ruling. And that construct is anthro. And so when talking about man or human or people, anthro is the construct that indicates we are talking about the common person. And so some sort of anthrocracy would be more appropriate than the democracy with its ambiguity. And here you can see more clearly this demos indicating municipality, township, commune, borough, county. This isn't really talking about individual human beings ruling anything. This is about the rule of municipality, rule of township, commune rule, borough rule. This is not about individual people ruling themselves. It's also interesting to note that this whole construct of democracy in the English is coming down from the Greek into the late Latin, into the French. And most recently, in the 15th century, we have this construct of democracy that has been translated as rule or power and the people, or the people, power, rule. However, again, this construct is ambiguous. And we're going to look at another understanding of demo. And here you can see the confusion just looking at the definition. You can see how this democracy deception takes place. It indicates a system of government by the whole population. Okay? And so many people believe that it means just that. The whole population governs the whole population. But there is a caveat here, or all the eligible members of a state. And then typically through elected representatives. And so by the time you get to through elected representatives, you have condensed this governance down to a very select group of people who do not have the time, energy, or wherewithal to get the voices of all of the people when it comes to them taking actions related to all of the people. And then you have this other idea of democracy relating to political, social, or economic equality. And so people think that that's a democratic form of government, including the absence of hereditary or arbitrary class distinctions or privileges. And so in this way, everyone gets a vote. Everyone's voice is heard. But when you look at what happens with the representative form of government, it's impossible for every voice to be heard. And what you have in effect is a system wherein there is a class of people with distinctions or privileges. And those are the only people in most instances that actually have a voice. That is in contrast to this idea that you see in the second definition, a form of government in which the people vote directly against or in favor of decisions, policies, and laws. And so that's in contrast to representing someone or being represented by someone who gets to vote in favor of policies, laws, and decisions. And here you see this repeated theory of demo being related to a district or a country or the common people. And here in Strong's Concordance, you see this idea of this demo being related to people being bound together or unified in conviction. This idea of the body politic. Also, there's a reference to the ecclesia. And again, you see this idea of people being massed together, and that this is what is meant by demo. Again, suggesting this idea of the people, the individual people having a voice. That's what people are thinking when they are voting, that they have a voice. But that's not exactly what's taking place. In fact, when people are voting, they are actually giving their voice away. When we look at this in totality, not only do we have a democracy deception, but we have election deception. What is election deception all about? Part of it is about not fully understanding what election is all about. And so by not fully understanding what election is all about, a deception comes about. And so what we see here when we look at this construct of elect, we are talking about the idea of individuals being chosen. These are the favored individuals. They are select individuals. They are also known as elite. And so elect and elite are synonymous. And so that's what we are talking about. This is completely inconsistent with this fantasy that is out there about democracy. Because when you have an elect group of people that are running things or ruling things, the power that's supposed to be invested in the people is no longer invested in the people. It's invested in the elect elite. And this is where the theocratic component comes in here. Because what we actually have in the election processes is a process of worship. And so that electing of the elite in order to rule is simply worshiping the elite, worshiping those who are considered chosen, putting certain individuals up on a pedestal. It is not about individual human beings participating in the rulership of society. It's the opposite of that. And so, if you are familiar with scripture or you've been participating in these discussions for a while, you know that that EL that is at the root of this entire dynamic is about a construct of a deity. And so, Eli, elite, elect, this is related to the deification dynamic. And so, what you have with the elite or the elect, you have a situation where individuals are essentially being deified. That's the putting up on the pedestal, giving the authority to rule, giving the authority to control, submitting to these entities in a very worshipful manner. And so if you look in Strong's Concordant, you can see the discussion related to Eli. And at 241, and this is in the Hebrew, you see that this Eli or Eli, and we've talked about Ella and Eloah, we've talked about all of these constructs related to El before. And of course, you see the definition is my God. Okay, so when you see that El, just like when you see that Ah or that Yah, you know that it is related to a deity. And in some instances, people historically have been deified. They've been put on a pedestal. They've been given positions of power, and sometimes it's hereditary power. And so you have these dynastic dynamics that are going on. But what you see here with respect to election is this dynamic of seeing people as chosen, seeing people as select, and seeing people as elite, and affirming that through the voting process. Now, there is quite a bit of attention focused on voting. Historically, voting has been a very important right for many people. And so it's that opportunity for many people to make known what their desires are. Voting, however, is a little deeper than simply saying these are one's desires. Vote comes from this construct of vow. And so when individuals are voting, they are making a vow. They are making an oath. They are creating a covenant. They are making a pledge, usually in relation to a particular person. And so when individuals are in the election processes, the attempt is to get people to make an oath to them, to pledge loyalty to an individual, to create a covenant in relation to an individual, to make a vow in relation to a particular individual. And so there was, of course, recent consternation about the manner in which what have been called black men might be voting. And part of this is about attempting to garner a pledge, a vow, a covenant from this particular collective of people. So this isn't just about someone articulating their desire. It's about making a sort of contract in many ways in relation to a particular individual. And again, we are talking about individuals who are elite, regardless of who you might be thinking of choosing. The individuals are elect individuals. They are not the common person. Not only is there a spiritual component to the election process related to vows and voting, what's also going on when you don't have a pure democracy is an externalized locus of control. And some people actually operate in the world where they believe that their locus of control is outside of themselves. When this happens, individuals are not taking responsibility for their lives. They are not taking responsibility for their decisions. They believe that when things happen to them, that these things are just randomly happening to them. They don't really have any power or control over a situation. And many people believe they need this externalized locus of control. They need someone else to take the power. They need someone else to take the reins. They need someone else to rule. They themselves do not feel competent to rule even their own lives. And so you can see how this whole dynamic would be uh, significantly pushed in relation to females, because there is a societal or cultural push for females to see the locus of control as outside of themselves. However, this applies to many people in general. And so you have some individuals who have an internalized locus of control and they want or desire less of the external control. And then you have individuals who want more of the control being outside of self. And what's taking place with elections or whatever this democracy is that we think we have going on is this push for externalized locus of control, this making a vow or an oath or a pledge in relation to someone else taking the reins, someone else taking the power. It's a loaning of power to an entity outside of self. And you see this narrative about this also in scripture, where the people were clamoring because they wanted to have a king just like all of the other people. And so they were begging for someone to have power over them versus the power being invested in them. And so what we see is that there is this concerted effort to have people abdicate their personal power. And there is this desire for many people to abdicate their personal power based upon this externalized locus of control. And who better to do this with than individuals who have no problem taking up the power? Because just like in the King James paradigm related to the divine right of kings, there are other individuals who believe that they have a divine right to rule other people. And there is a belief by people, many people, that they have a divine responsibility to abdicate the personal power to those who are chosen to absorb that power. Part of the psycho-spiritual dynamic that goes on with elections is a popularity contest type of situation. And so the elections are not really about people voicing their opinion about laws and statutes and policies. It's really about who is the most popular, who wins the popularity contest. It's like an award show. You see these celebrities that have award shows. So you have the Grammys and you have the Emmys and the Oscars. Well, that's what this is. And so the elections are basically the Emmys, the Oscars, and the Grammys for politicians. Now, this is not to suggest that all of the individuals who are running for various offices are narcissists. However, what is taking place for many individuals is this sort of energy vampirism related to these votes, these vows, these pledges. And so individuals are getting what is known as narcissistic supply in the midst of these processes. And so when individuals are chosen or they are elected, they are seen as special. They are seen as above the common person. All of those votes and all of those vows and all of those pledges translate in many ways to what is known as narcissistic supply. What's also interesting, again, is that individuals don't tend to think about writing themselves in as the candidate that they want to elect to articulate what their desires are related to laws and statutes and policies. Instead, they elect people that they don't know from a can of paint to articulate the elected person's desires related to the laws and the statutes and the policies. And so again, it really is the unvoicing of the people, the way that we, currently have this structured. It is the unvoicing of the people. Now we're going to look at this whole King James dynamic related to the divine right of kings. And so he's basically saying there is this deity right of kings to rule. And not only did he believe that about himself, according to the narratives, he believed this in general related to monarchs, related to nobility. He believed that there was a spiritual right, a God-given right of certain individuals to rule over other people. And so there was a deifying of certain groups of people, these monarchs, these kings, these nobles. And oddly, this is tied to democracy, because this divine right of kings is tied to the construct of demo and cracy, democracy. It's just a different understanding of what that demo part is. The rule is still there, but this demo that King James is talking about is not about the people. It's about the gods with a little g. And here you can see, when looking at these etymology dynamics related to demo, that there is another understanding of demo, and it is tied to demon. And sometimes demon is related to individuals who are seen in a god-like status. And so while many of us think of democracy as a rule by the people, another way of understanding democracy is that it is ruled by these entities that are considered God with a little g, goddess, or those with divine power. And so this is the demo that King James is talking about when he's talking about the divine right of kings. And so this is an alternate democracy going on here. So this idea of elect groups of people running things with sort of divine power, that's not the same as the individual common man or woman ruling things. And so you can see this construct not only coming out of the ancient Greek, this whole idea of God, goddess, divine power, and this demo or demon. You see it also coming out of the Latin. You see it coming out of the Portuguese. And you also see that this construct is tied to Christian doctrine. And so what we see when we are looking at democracy and the democracy deception is that democracy is related more to, in terms of the way it operates in current times, it's tied more to what King James is talking about. It's tied to that whole idea of the divine right of the elect or the select or the chosen, the gods, the goddesses with the divine power. It's about them ruling, not about the people ruling. It's not about the people having an internalized locus of control. It's about the people having an external locus of control. And here you can see a continuation of this analysis in terms of the etymology in Strong's Concordance. And so you see it here in the Greek. And so in addition to the dynamic of God with a little g, goddess, divine entity, we also see this correlation with fallen angel. And so we see this idea of these angelic beings related to this demo or daemon or demos. And here you can see that there is a little bit more specificity related to this God with a little g or goddess or an inferior deity. And so the way these kings and queens and nobles have been treated throughout history is like they have been inferior deities, deities nonetheless. And it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about a good deity or a bad deity. It's the fact that the entities are treated as deities. They are worshiped as deities. They are celebrated as deities because they are treated as if they have a divine right to rule, and many times an unquestioned divine right to rule. And here, consistent with all of that, we see that this demo or demos or daemon is simply related to a supernatural spirit. And so these are entities that are seen as above the natural, above, again, the common person. They are in celebrity status. And celebrities are treated in the same manner. There is this worshiping of celebrities. And there are often times when celebrities will take the place of the common man and purport to speak for the common man. And so their voice is elevated. Their desires and their thoughts are seen as representing the common man. And so therefore they are given more credence in terms of whatever it is they are thinking or feeling or articulating at a particular time. And what's also interesting is when you go back to the discussion in Strong's related to demo, that's talking about the people, when you see these forms and transliterations down below, you see that there is this translation or transliteration that includes demon. Demon. You see it several times. Now, along with this democracy construct, we also have this archy construct. And so, what is that all about? It's another way of saying rule. And here we have this breakdown of this kratia, indicating rule, power, might, sway, power over, power, authority, strength. And so we are talking about all of those things in relation to a particular entity. And that entity, as we've seen, is not necessarily the anthro, the people. There's also a construct that goes along with this kratia, this rule, power, might, and it's related to an actual entity that exercises the power, the rule, the might. And the term in the Greek is archon. And you can find this at Strong's at 758. And it means ruler or chief leader. A ruler, a governor, a leader, a leading man or woman. And consistent with the paradigm that is put forth by King James, we see that archon includes princes. And here you can see very clearly that not only do you have these archons that are chief or ruler in terms of executive function, you also see in terms of judicial function. And so you see here the 9 chief magistrates of ancient Athens, the archon, the ruler, the chief, the captain. It means to be first, to govern, to be the leader of, to lead the way. And again, this is going right back to ancient Greek, and it's going right back to the societal structure that, according to the narrative, was in place during those times. And so there were these 9 chief magistrates of ancient Athens. And so that paradigm continues on even into current times. And so whether we are talking about a demoarchy or a democracy, we see that there are multiple constructs tied to these ideas. And the often overlooked one is this dynamic of a theocracy. And so it is, again, consistent with the King James paradigm, a rule by a god with a little g, a goddess, or an inferior deity or someone who has been deified. And so that's what we are really looking at in terms of the structure that we currently have in place. We are not talking about a structure, again, wherein we as individual people are actively participating in the rulership or the governing of society. We have a structure in place where we have consented to be governed. And so you've perhaps heard that construct of government depending on the consent of the governed. And so that's basically what we have. We don't have that standard democracy that people are thinking about. And when individuals vote, this is not discouraging people with respect to voting, by the way. What I am saying is when we have the dynamic of voting going on, if individuals are not directly voting on laws and policies and things like that, then what is going on is that giving away of or loaning power to these deified entities.